Who is responsible for Taiwan's defense?
Part 58. A trusteeship for Taiwan. The idea that Taiwan could be placed under some sort of trusteeship agreement was very popular in certain circles in Taiwan in the 1940s and 1950s. Local people who felt that the governance of the ROC KMT regime was too harsh were particularly robust in their support for such an arrangement.
However, the specifications of the post-World War II SFPT only proposed a UN trusteeship for the Ryukyu Island Group. The United States was designated as the sole administering authority. This was not surprising, since the Ryukyu Island Group was conquered by U.S. military forces during World War II. SFPT Article 3 confirms this by specifying,
pending the making of such a proposal,
for a UN trusteeship,
and affirmative action thereon, the United States will have the right to exercise all and any powers of administration, legislation and jurisdiction over the territory and inhabitants of these islands, including their territorial waters.
Of course, the direct result of conquest is to obtain jurisdiction over the territory. Such jurisdiction applies in peace and in war. Accordingly, under the laws of war, with the surrender of Japanese troops in the Ryukyus in September 1945, this island group will automatically come under the jurisdiction of a U.S. federal agency called the United States Military Government, USMG.
In the practice of the United States, military government is the form of administration by which an occupying power exercises governmental authority over occupied territory.
Indeed, SFPT Article 4b confirms U.S. military government jurisdiction over the Ryukyu Island Group. This again corroborates the viewpoint that governance of this envisioned Ryukyu trusteeship will be very similar to the governance of occupied territory.
Non-desirability of UN trusteeship arrangements. However, within a few months of the SFPT coming into force, U.S. government officials began to have serious doubts about the desirability of placing the Ryukyu Island Group under a UN trusteeship. Due to the specifications of Articles 82 and 83 of the UN Charter, the buildup of U.S. military forces in the Ryukyus, and overall management of newly established U.S. military facilities therein, could be subject to Russian oversight and a possible Russian veto. So, the question became, after the United States abandoned its plans for making a proposal to the United Nations seeking UN trusteeship status for the Ryukyus, what would be the disposition of this island group? Clearly, the Ryukyus are still under U.S. military jurisdiction. Accordingly, many people might venture to say, with no UN trusteeship agreement in place, the Ryukyus have now become an overseas territory of the USA.
As a U.S. overseas territory, this must mean that the Ryukyu Islands would be governed under the authority of the U.S. Constitution's Territorial Clause, Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2.
Note: for ease of reference, we can refer to territories under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Constitution's Territorial Clause as Category 1 territories.
We are now living in the 21st century. A close examination of U.S. history texts finds no record that the Ryukyus were ever considered to have come under the U.S. Constitution's Territorial Clause, or that they were identified as forming a U.S. overseas territory. The same statement can be made for Cuba after the Spanish-American War. How can this anomaly be explained? Can it be true that under the U.S. Constitution there is a recognition of what we might call Category 2 territories? This subject is certainly worthy of investigation. Examination of the U.S. Constitution and Supreme Court decisions.
a quick review of the U.S. Constitution reveals that it has a territorial clause but no trusteeship clause. Nevertheless, in the post-Spanish-American War era, the U.S. Supreme Court has recognized the existence of trusteeship-type arrangements over certain territory which has come under U.S. military government jurisdiction.
In other words, there is the automatic creation of a fiduciary relationship, which is best described as the relationship between a trustee, beneficiaries, and property held in trust.
Hence, it seems highly probable that the best description for Cuba after the coming into force of the Spanish-American Peace Treaty on April 11, 1899, and the Ryukyu Island Group after the coming into force of the SFPT on April 28, 1952 as U.S. Overseas Quasi-Trusteeship. Further documentation on this aspect will be given in future films and accompanying web pages.
Are there any valid comparisons between the post-war historical situations of Cuba, the Ryukyus, and Taiwan? Do we need to re-evaluate our thinking about how Taiwan should deal with the possibility of invasion by outside military forces? Defensive responsibility. In the mid-1950s, what if someone asked, who is responsible for the Ryukyus' defense?
Let's suppose that after its new Minister of Defense took office in September 1957, North Korea attacked the Ryukyus. Under the Common Defense Clause of the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, the U.S. Department of Defense, in conjunction with the local U.S. military authorities in the RUCUs, would be in charge of coordinating a response. No supplemental U.S. congressional legislation would be needed.
Further detailed comparisons between Cuba, the RUCUs, and Taiwan will be presented in future films and accompanying web pages.
But first we need to continue to overview numerous alternate theories of sovereignty for the ROC in Taiwan. Our goal is to uncover any viable explanations whereby it can be held that the Republic of China in Taiwan actually fulfills the requirements to be regarded as an independent sovereign nation, and therefore bears full responsibility for handling its own national defense responsibilities.